hey, here is a great idea when you talk about money and spending. One of the best ways the average everyday person like you and myself and our listening audience can do, if you really want to return for your money, and not many people talk about this, but we can make a huge change if we buy stuff we consume regularly in bulk. And now you got to be careful with that. I'm not talking about the printer ink for the printer you have. Yeah, I mean, get a couple extra cartridges maybe, but the printer might go bad and break. And as cheap as they are these days, you get another printer and it might not be the same ink. But if you use a certain shampoo, if you use a certain trash bag, if you use a certain item around your house for your family that you know you're going to use, I mean, you're unless you plan on not showering 6 months from now, you're going to need shampoo or body wash or soap or something. So I highly recommend, if you, especially if you see these products come on sale, because they do, I'd buy them in bulk, and you can actually see a tremendous savings by doing that over a 6-month period.
That's an excellent point. One of the things, as you were talking, my mind is kind of wandering a little bit to topics that are related. And I was thinking, okay, well, let's bring this back to the big three. Most people spend most of their money on housing, transportation, and groceries. So you're hitting the grocery thing hard right now, and that's a great point. I mean, now might be a good time to consider getting involved with one of those bulk buying outlet stores, right? Like Sam's or BJ's or Costco or something like that. Because if you can buy things like toilet paper and paper towels, and those things are not really going to be less useful 6 months from now than they are today, right? So it's like you talked about shampoo. There's a lot of what we buy that we can buy larger quantities, and they're going to be just as good 6 months from now as they are today, but they're probably a lot less expensive today than they will be in 6 months. So exactly. That's a good way to do it. We've talked to a certain extent about housing. What about automobiles? What about transportation?
So automobiles, the same would apply to that. If you plan on, if you know you're going to need an automobile in the next 12 months, I'd go ahead and start shopping now and get familiar with the process, get familiar with the price range you're going to be looking at. It's going to be easy to overspend. Just don't pay attention. Just, everybody wants the new fancy bells and whistles. But an interesting side note when it comes to transportation and automotive, you spoke about the big box clubs and buying in bulk. Kind of another benefit of them is they typically sell gas. Don't know if many people pay attention to that, but I'm a member, just in full disclosure, I'm a member and have been for years of a local big box club we have here. Well, it's a national company, but anyway. And a lot of people don't realize that gas is 15 to 25 cents cheaper per gallon. And that adds up and more than pays for the membership cost. And so I highly recommend, if you have a family of 4 or more, there's certain items that you need in bulk. I highly recommend a big box club, because that's going to help you on the automotive side too. It's going to cut your gas bill down.
Yeah. Well, those things matter, because one of the things that we don't often think about is that 7% inflation is kind of an aggregated computation, and it's weighted for some things and so on and so forth, but not everything is actually inflating at the same rate. And so one thing that you've seen is that the cost of gasoline over the last 12 months is way more than 7% up, right? And there are quite a few things that you buy at the grocery store that are way over 7% year over year. meat, for example, pretty much any meat you would purchase, whether it's beef or pork or turkey or chicken or any of it, let alone seafood, right? So um, those are the kind of things where if you can buy those now, um, and hold on to grocery items over the long haul, that is a way to start saving. And another thing, unfortunately, you're going to have to think about is, cutting back on eating out and things like that. I know my wife and I used to be a lot more willing to just go out when we felt like it. We're pretty much down to like once or twice a week, that we have set aside. And part of it, is for health reasons, but it's a little easier to do that, honestly, when you know that you're saving a substantial amount of money. I mean,
Sure.
My wife and my mother-in-law and I went out to a seafood place nearby last week, and just for the three of us for lunch, you throw the tip in there, it was like about $70.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a lot of money,
Yeah.
for just the two of us. Our grocery bill is not even twice that every week. And it's a little easier to say no. And that's unfortunate, because it obviously does resonate in the economy. People aren't getting as many tips and things like that. But um, you got to think about positioning yourself for what's coming. And we know that when the economy is facing some tough headwinds, which it's likely. I mean, you never know 100% sure what's coming, but it's reasonable to forecast that interest rates are going to go up. One of the other things that the Federal Reserve has talked about is that they're going to be stopping their bond buying. So what that effectively means is the Federal Reserve is not going to be doing as much quantitative easing. They're not going to be putting more cash into the economy. So the money supply is either going to stop growing and stay static, or depending on the policy, the money supply may start to shrink a little bit. So what that's going to mean is that if we still have inflation, but there's less money in the economy, then fewer people are going to be able to afford those higher prices, which means that all of us are going to have to make difficult choices. Most of us are probably already making difficult choices, but the likelihood is that's going to continue to be the case. And that's going to mean less economic activity. And so that's going to reverberate through the economy over the next, year or two, if not longer. And so, it's going to affect every individual differently, but you can still prepare as if there's a reasonable likelihood that these things could happen, so that if they do happen, or when they do happen, you're in a position where you're not, behind the eight ball. You're not having to choose one thing or the other. It's not pleasant, but it's not going to substantially alter your, lifestyle choices or anything like that.
The Purposeful Podcast.